good morning, all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to Acfim Talks. Today, the it is the 7th of July. We are in October 2022, and 2 days shy of celebrating Uganda's 60th independence. And I'll be coming back to that. But with me, I have two distinguished guests that I'll be introducing in a short while. But as usual, my name is Felix Kafuma, and before I start, I usually use this time to encourage everybody to join us every Friday, same time, same place. You can get our notifications on all our social media platforms because we are live on live stream. We are live on Facebook, live on Twitter, and live on YouTube. Yes, below are the handles. We are live on Facebook, Acfim UG, our YouTube account, and at Acfim UG on our Twitter handle. You can be part of these conversations every Friday around the same time. And today we are looking at the theme Uganda at 60. We are reflecting on the state of electoral democracy. And as I told you earlier, that on Sunday we will be celebrating our 60th independence, and it's important that we reflect on the journey so far. Uganda, imagine Uganda, a human being at 60 years, is quite a milestone. And let me give this a bit of a context, then I will introduce my guests, and then we pick it up from there. For anybody who's just joining us, Uganda has come of age, if I may put it that way, and in a couple of days, on Sunday to be exact, Sunday will be 9th October, the country will be celebrating 60 years of self-rule, a period that has been characterized by oscillation between multi-party democracy and authoritarianism. Whereas the first 30 years were characterized by political turbulence, that is between 62 to about 86. The second half has been characterized by political stability, ushered in and superintended by General Yoweri Museveni Kaguta, who is the current president. And when it comes to electoral democracy, however, there are stark differences between political parties before at independence, political parties in the 80s, and the political parties after 2005 at the return of multi-party politics under President Museveni's leadership. Some people have argued that Uganda has never had what is understood to be free and fair elections, whereas other people would point to the 1961 that ushered in the Prime Minister Milton Obote under the Kabaka Yekka and Uganda People's Congress Alliance as an election, perhaps, that was close to being described as free and fair. And we'll come back to that as well. It's worth noting that almost all elections in Uganda, except the one of 1966, have been contested. One of the most contested elections was that one in 1980, which resulted into a group of armed citizens going to the bush to wage a successful guerrilla war. That is the NRA now, which is in power now, under the vehicle of NRM, the political party. And since the return of multi-party politics in 2005, have almost all the elections have been contested in courts of law and have been characterized by violence and commercialization of politics. Uganda today is confronted with the problem of systematic democratic reversals, but Uganda is not unique because it's also global, under a constitution whose safeguards have also been systematically removed. In this episode, we take an excursion and reflect on the electoral democracy landscape of Uganda at 60. Once again, welcome to Acfim Talks, your host, Felix Kafuma. And I'm joined by two distinguished guests. Let me first introduce the first guest is Honorable John Ken Luchamzi, who is commonly known as Ken Luchamzi or the man. He is a politician and a lawyer and the leader of the Conservative Party. He has served in the 7th Parliament. He also served in the 9th Parliament. 7th Parliament, that was 2001 to 2006. and also served in the ninth parliament, that is 2011 to 2016. I think many remember Honorable John Ken Chamsi being, I think, one of the first victims in parliament, victims of the Leadership Act, where the Inspectorate of Government picked out the honorable on grounds that he had failed to declare his personal assets. Of course, I know, John, you sued and you won. You were compensated for that wrongful dismissal. But at least there was a precedent set when that act was applied. So he lost in 2016 to the incumbent then, Katol Wama, who also lost in 2021. Honorable, you are most welcome to Acfim Talks.
Thank you very much indeed.
It's good to have you. Our other panelist is a regular here. It's not the first time he's been on Acfim Talks. He is also an expert in his right. He is Henry Muguzi, who is an electoral democracy expert and also the executive director of Alliance for Finance Monitoring. Henry, you are most welcome to Acfim Talks.
Thank you, Felix, and of course, thank you for having me. And good morning, our viewers, wherever you are joining us from.
All right. Once again, good morning, everybody who's joining us. Probably good afternoon elsewhere and evening. And let me get this off the ground. And I'm going to start with the Honorable. When you look at Uganda, let's assume a 60-year-old human being. It is expected that someone at 60 years is mature, has come of age, and has experience. And like they say, wisdom comes with age. So he also carries wisdom in the way he conducts himself. Let's look at the different aspects of electoral democracy, because that's the theme, as we reflect our 60-year-old journey. Comment on the quality of elections of Uganda since independence to date.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to begin the discussion with our colleague Henry, whom I also admire very much in regard to what he has been doing. Although we are in an electoral catastrophe and a political constitutional confusion, it does not remove the fact that Uganda is an independent nation. And we are also committed to our Uganda, and we love Uganda. So to kick off the discussion, permit me to recite a poem of 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes, in honor of the Ugandan nation. Uganda is a land of the sun. It is a land of the gorillas. It is a land of the zebras. It is a land of the lions. It is the pearl of Africa. At the Maxon Falls, when the waters flow, the lions roar, the giraffes yawn, and the rains fall. Uganda is a nation of many nations with diverse peoples, diverse cultures. They are ruled Pukot, Kamojongo, Abanyankole, Abakiga. They are also kings, Morimori, Omkuka, Adora, Obusinga, Ruwoti, Kyabazinga, Obusoga, Omukama Obutoro, Omukama Obunyoro. In Buganda, the Kabaka reigns. He does not rule, but he still commands. There are also birds, beautiful birds, singing birds. The African skimmer, the shoe-bill stork, the fish eagle, the crested crane, the crested gray. That's the end of the poem.
Thank you, Honorable, for reminding us that it's a beautiful country.
Yes, in spite of the problems.
Yes.
You posed a very interesting question. It is interesting to discuss the history of Uganda very briefly. I do not agree with people who attribute the problems Uganda is in to colonialism or neo-colonialism. The colonialists played their part and they went and they ushered in independence. But it is funny that since we last became an independent nation, for the last 60 years or so, Uganda has never gained the fruits it expected before independence. There are many people who could even call in for the colonialists to return and possibly bring glory, although I'm not one of them. For the last 60 years, we last tested the pudding of peace and public discussion in the first regime, which ended physically in 1966 when Obote bombarded the Rubiri and abrogated the 1962 constitution, only to tell Parliament that the members of Parliament would find the next constitution in their respective pigeonholes. I must say that since then, Uganda has been a problem area. Botin ushered in the Common Man's Charter when they moved to the left strategy. He was booted in 1971. But before he was booted, Uganda enjoyed the glory of economics and social services under a semi-federal system of government, a system that empowered the regions and autonomous regions to exercise power, governance, and respective responsibilities. In 1971, Idi Amin came in. Idi Amin was scared in 1975 when he tried to tamper with the land to assume that land is a government ownership. He was scared when his Attorney General, Godfrey Ray, resigned and he left the land question at a stalemate. He never tampered with the rest of the reforms he had wanted. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni comes in, the rest of the reformations that took place are well known. Lule, Binaisa, Tito Kero, Mwanga, and eventually President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, 1986. For the last 37 years since President Museveni came in, I think we are going backwards. Things had started improving in the 90s, but as it became dictatorial, we got a blacker page and things started worsening. As we speak now, there is a big challenge. The challenge before President Museveni and his colleagues. Why did they go to the bush if they could not fulfill what they promised when they came in power in 1986? For example, the 1995 Constitution was a good constitution, reasonably good constitution, although it never brought in certain things that were reported by Justice Odoki in his report. For example, I would like to state that when President Museveni came to power at the parliamentary buildings, he said, mine is a real change, a fundamental change. It is not a change, a pretense. It is not a change of the guards, but a fundamental change. I have come to rescue Ugandans from the shackles of domination by leaders that come to power and they don't want to leave power. I must say I was not in the CA, but I was an active politician outside Parliament, and I used to sit in the gallery to watch the flow of words and the very rich discussions, the Kanyahambas, the Mlengas, the Kitarikos, the Mayanjankangis, the Abu Mayanjas. The debates was intellectually fascinating. The success story of the 1995 Constitution was embedded in 3 benchmarks. If those benchmarks had been put into action, Uganda would not be where it is now. The first benchmark was a transition benchmark, presidential term limits. Whether Kenny Chalmers is good or belittling with the action, once he finishes the first 10 years, the 2 terms, he must step aside. And that was guaranteeing transition. The second benchmark was the presidential age limit. Whether Okero is as good as Jesus Christ, when he clocks 75 years, he must step aside. The third benchmark was the general election. Permit it or not, whether you like it or not, you cannot change the leadership of the present government through general elections. Testimony has been put across in the Supreme Court on 3 consecutive occasions. The judges nearly wanted to pronounce certain elections null and void, but because of a provision reading Section 59 of the Presidential Elections Act, they wrote it in such a way that it had to keep it, to make it difficult for court to pronounce a repetition of the elections. So that means through general elections in today's Museveni Uganda, you cannot deceive yourself that you can change or bring about transition. For the last 60 years also, since independence, it has not been possible for Uganda to change leadership at the top. So where is Uganda going? We are going back to the darker days that may require personalities without fear to take over or to fight until they throw down the government. That would be a tragedy of perhaps the highest magnitude.
Thank you so much, Honorable, giving us that trajectory. Picked it 1962, 66, 71, 75, the years in between, fast forward to 86. Henry, what's your take? You've observed the elections for the last couple, I think about four elections you've observed, others you've participated. From where you stand, what's your take on the quality of elections since independence?
Thank you very much, Felix. I should get on record to say I'm quite honored and profoundly so to share this platform with my own old boy, because both of us went to St. Henry's College, Kitovu, and that's something that I need to mention.
I'm excited to hear that, Henry.
When you were, discussing, the poem about how nice Uganda is, the yawning glass, the rain, all these things, the crested crane. I only you made me conclude. Remember the conclusion we have always made, that Uganda, a country gifted by nature, but only cursed by greed. But having said that, let me say that we are looking at a 60-year-old country, a country that is at a situation that you can define, if you like, as being at a cliffhanger. A country that has never witnessed any peaceful transfer of power, and that on most of the occasions we have changed the power, we have had to rely on the intervention of foreign forces. Most likely, we have not gone through elections. Most likely, the same will happen. You cannot speak about independence without speaking about all the aspects of nation building. And I want to start by articulating where we are politically, economically, and socially, and then I will delve into your question. So politically, we are in a situation where you cannot know which direction we are taking. You have a son of the president a general that is behaving in a way and a manner that you can only describe as gargantuan, gaga, larger than life, cannot be touched. And he's told us that democracy here is a dream, because for us what we have here is a revolution. That's what we've been told. You have a situation where political parties have been denied the opportunity to operate. You cannot have a situation where political party activities are only restricted to the headquarters in Kampala. You dare go outside of Kampala and purport to be trying to popularize the agenda of your political party and see how you are going to be gagged and restrained by the security forces. You have a situation where you don't know whether the institutions you have are actually as independent as they should be. You have a parliament that has been captured from the time of Obote 1, which Honorable Ken Chams talks about the introduction of the pigeonhole constitution, and whatever preceded there captured parliament, and that parliament of Uganda has been captured until to date. Today, it is something that NRM dominated parliament can best be described as a rubber stamp of the regime, because it cannot, except on a few cases, and even you can even question the stances they have taken, but largely the president, the executive will push through a legislation that they want, which is why the removal of those roadblocks, the term limits, the age limits, sailed through almost with ease. You have an economic situation which does not depict any independence. Now I'm talking about the economics. I was reviewing the number of, you see, our economy has been handed over to foreign forces, to former colonial masters, and they have a myriad of companies marauding around the economy. I was reviewing a list of European companies. I have counted 251 EU companies that are doing business here, silently killing, making a kill. I have counted 150 Chinese companies making a kill, over 52 American companies here, over 38 Canadian, over 25 Australian. The economy is not in the hands of Ugandans. Earlier on, I was in a meeting of Indians, and when they are alone, the Indians, they claim that they are contributing 80% of Uganda's GDP. Where is your independence as Uganda? And socially, what do we have? If you have Nyege Nyege being the most spoken thing, how does that board with the socio-cultural aspects of the country? So there's no country we don't have an independence you can speak about as being independent. And therefore, in terms of where we are, you spoke about in your intro about the descent, the systematic descent towards electoral authoritarianism. When you have one party and one leader that has this imperious character that dominates and domineers around, that does not allow any other person political space, that will have to conduct elections that look like elections on the surface, but they're not elections. We are just doing a legitimization of the regime in office. A country where you have one leader that has been in office for 37 years, and his son probably feels that one of the things he might have to inherit from his father is Uganda. And you talk about democracy. Where are we headed? So I think we have this 60-year-old human being that really needs help. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much, Henry. There's something you say that I'm finding interesting. Political parties have been denied space to operate, and their activities have been restricted to the headquarters. Honorable, let me come back to you, and I'm picking it up from there. you are a political party leader, and you live in the current times Henry has just described. But also, you had an opportunity to live in the times before the regime of General Yoweri Museveni Kaguta. If you compare political parties of Uganda at independence and the political parties today, do the political parties mirror the person called Uganda at 60? Have we seen growth? When you talk about elections, you can't talk about elections without talking about political parties participating in elections. If you look at that journey and where we are, what is your take on the performance, functionality, composition, and behavior of political parties over the last 60 years?
Thank you very much. I must first of all thank Henry for his articulate interpretation of the tragedy in Uganda. I was enjoying him very much, and I would like to thank him very much. The political party tragedy begins in 1980. Well, it began in 1969, and the Bataringayas changed sides, moved to the UPC, eventually voted declaring all the other political parties null and void, and leaving only the UPC as a one-party system of government. First of all, I think I should clear the dust that I see around still lingering in the history of political parties in Uganda. A person in the names of Benedicto Kiwanuka was a huge political light for Uganda. Apparently, he made some errors, and those errors in human history are sometimes inevitable. At the time when Uganda was getting independence, political parties were a new phenomenon in Uganda. There was the Lancaster House Constitutional Conference in 1961, where delegations attended a constitutional conference in London. But each area in Uganda was represented, and Uganda was created in 1961. Apparently, in Uganda, which was very ready politically, although it did not have political parties were very new, and it became difficult for Uganda to participate in elections without knowing the fate of the next destination. That is why they kept on boycotting elections, principally, both in 1959, 58, and 1961. This is where, when Benedicto Kiwanuka insisted on participating under DP, most of the participants in Uganda got very low votes. Some got 16 votes, some got 28, others 30, and one could not maintain a government with that kind of minority response in terms of elections. So that is why the elections are to be redone in 1962, bringing in Kabaka Eka. Kabaka Eka came on board because it was inevitable. First of all, Uganda had only 4 months to decide whether it would participate in elections and a political party system. It did not want to join the UPC, and it did not want to join the Democratic Party because their interests were not catered for by manifestation in those two respective political parties. So they choose to generate Kabaka Eka as a movement which eventually won elections in Uganda, and they formed an alliance with the Uganda People's Congress. But the crux of the matter now is in 1980, after overthrowing Idi Amin, political parties were brought back on table, and there was a general election in December 1980. To the disappointment of so many people, because of the dictatorial tendencies underlying Mwanga and his regime, a Democratic Party won those elections, and Obote and his group rigged the elections to announce that UPC had won. Now, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni's party got only one vote, one member of parliament, and he ran away out of the country, Dr. Kionga. He went to the bush on behalf of the Democratic Party. But since President Museveni went to the bush on behalf of the Democratic Party, he has not demonstrated that the key holder of the aftermath would have been the Democratic Party. So this is where lack of confidence, lack of trust begins in our history. When President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni comes in power, he started treating political parties as NGOs, Boy Scouts, Mbale, Miras, Association, that kind of thing. But in our constitution, the political parties have got a chapter. Political parties are supposed to be the vanguard of government. They form the framework under which the Uganda government must operate. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, it is stated power belongs to the people. Article 1 of the Constitution. And under the same Constitution, all power and authority of government and its organs derive their authority from the Constitution. Under the same provision, Article 1, Clause 4, people shall express their support and how they want to be governed through general elections. Through general elections. The general elections in Uganda, the chapter is dead. It is there to benefit only President Museveni and the NRM. That is why they don't want to leave power, because they know that the moment they leave power, things will go wrong. All the properties they have acquired illegally through illicit expectations will be checked by the next government. That's what they think. For example, under apartheid in South Africa, there was law. There was no rule of law, but there was rule by law. This is exactly what is happening in Uganda. Under Section 59 of the Presidential Elections Act, whether you like it or not, whether you have a valid case in the Supreme Court causing a repeat of the elections, it cannot happen, because that provision makes it difficult for court to pronounce a repeat of the elections when it says whatever evidence accumulated must be substantial enough to warrant the order of fresh elections. In Namboze, Betty versus Bakalwa Mukasa, I'm talking as a lawyer now, court observed that Bakalwa Mukasa, in one of the villages on Sunday after service, dished out money which was shared by the residents of that village. According to the judge in that case, there was sufficient evidence for court to pronounce a repeat of the elections. Why should it equally have happened in the case of Dr. Kiza Besigye versus Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and the Electoral Commission in 2006 and 2016 respectively? Putting that aside, we are now confused. It seems as if the Uganda government under President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni would like to rule us as if we are in the chapter of Hitler and Stalin. And we are getting disappointed, because in a case of Mwanga Kivumbi versus the Attorney General in 2005, the Constitutional Court ruled that police cannot presuppose the occurrence of a tragedy for any meeting. Let the tragedy occur in a meeting and then police can come in. But to say that, you Mwanga Kivumbi, you cannot hold a public rally because we fear that your meeting might be chaotic, it cannot happen. That was ruled out. What Museveni and the company did is to bring in place another law that works as the previous law. the Public Order Act. Even if you are 5 people found in a group, police can intercept such a meeting. Uganda should wake up. We are in a problem, we are in a crisis. The bottle will burst one of these days and the crisis will come back. But nobody would like to have another crisis that we have had in recent years. That is why there is a need for Mr. Mao Norbert, if he's serious, he should stop talking about transition in the year 2031. You, Norbert Mao, don't sleep. You are joking. We are talking about what should happen in the year 2026, not in the year 2031. Something must be done right now in the form of holding a public dialogue to discuss the way through which we can get over the muddles of the kind crisis. Otherwise, anything could happen. It will be regrettable for us to see another person going back to Luero to Bush. The Bush days are gone. This is why we want to talk at large, to make sure that the junta understands that there is a constitutional crisis which must be resolved now.
Okay, thank you so much. For starters, there is no bush to go to. All the bushes have been cleared.